Well, greetings, friends. It is Paul Thompson with my dear buddy Steve.Autrey, and I got a good word for you today.
Well,
Every
it's
new
about time.
beginning, well,
I'm
okay,
ready.
long haul finds an acre every once in a while. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. So that's the song that was played in the '90s, became popular, "Closing Time," and it's kind of got.
I did not know you were a Semisonic fan.
I'm not, but the song is pretty cool. And then I did hear, and I did hear that closing line, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And here I am at an ending, as we're also entering into the season of from Lent into Good Friday and Easter, and it's just got me all reflective and thinking about this whole idea. So
So for folks who may just be tuning in for the first time, you're not. Can you explain
I'm
what you're
not
talking
dying, I
about?
hope.
Okay, all right. Okay,
That's
because you
my
left that
hope.
out
But
there a little bit, and if you don't
yeah,
know the
so
context,
yeah,
context does
so
matter, Pastor Paul.
context does matter. I am retiring as of June, end of June, as pastor of Huntersville United Methodist Church, and quite excited about what will be next, but also recognize to get to what's next, sometimes you have to stop doing something. And so that's got me really reflective and thinking. And then another part of this whole journey is, we make a big deal of Christmas. If this was December, we'd be having 14 parties to go to. We'd be having presents under trees. We'd be having all sorts of stuff going on in
Parades,
anticipation
lots
of
of
that
parades.
big holiday of Christmas. Well, friends, if we're being honest with each other, if we're being true to the faith, we are not Christmas people. We're Easter people. Not that Christmas is not important, but the whole story of the good news of Jesus Christ really comes into focus at Easter.
Well, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so for us today, I hope we're gonna have a few minutes to chat with you about the events that lead up to that Easter Sunday and how each is so important to the story, and you really can't get to the fullness of the Easter message until you've walked through a Maundy Thursday time. You have to go through the crucifixion on that Friday afternoon. You have to even rest in that place of in between on Saturday before you can get to the joy of what we anticipate being on that Easter Sunday. So, Steve, man, we got some conversation to have with these
yeah,
folks
there are a
today.
couple of thoughts. Fred Craddock has written that if you don't go to the funeral, you shouldn't get to go to the after party.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
He's my favorite preacher. He's so good.
he's a little better than the likes of us.
Well, I've told this story before. He preached a sermon in probably
Was it that
1998,
annual
something
conference?
like that.
Was
Yeah,
it
an
that?
annual conference,
It
and
was
I
night.
still remember the sermon.
It was 1996.
96.
Yeah.
You know it's a good sermon when 30 years later I'm still
Was it
remembering.
the one about the
Pretty good sermon.
quiz? It's not a quiz.
Well, this one was when he looked at the ordinands and said, "Those of you who are gifted, I'm going to pray for you harder because
Well,
that you're going to rely on your ability rather than on God."
well,
And
e-
I just thought
evidently
resonated
I
so
didn't
deeply.
require many of Fred Craddock's prayers.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Well, and yet I would be guilty of thinking, this thing really is about me and how good a preacher I am and administrator and the whole kingdom's tied into how well I perform. I'm still fall prey to that.
Yeah. The other thought was we have Christmas parades, but we rarely have anything we would call an Easter parade. We may have a Good Friday procession, and Easter week leading into Easter, Holy Week actually starts with a parade
Yeah,
of sorts. But
yeah.
we don't have what you would call an Easter parade. I know town of Denver, town of Huntersville, probably not, they have a Christmas parade, but they're not having an Easter parade, I would imagine.
So that's where I'm going Sunday. We refer to this coming Sunday in the life of the church as the triumphal entry or Palm Sunday processional.
And it's
And
also, but also just a caveat to that, it is also Passion Sunday, which is a which is an interesting thing. And I don't think you can really do both of them. Because if you did, you would read about all the ends of the New Testament gospel lessons. So, but passion means the suffering, and we forget that. I mean, the passion of Christ. That's something that confused me when I first heard that word, and that's probably not a language you heard growing up either in your tradition.
no,
Uh, and ours, we had the same Southern Baptist tradition growing up that we never, so when I heard the passion, I always thought passion as a more of a positive thing, but the passion means suffering. And so what do we do with the suffering of Jesus? And how do we get from, hey, he's coming in and people are celebrating and Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, to um, it goes south for him from the celebration to the cross. And how do we get there? So that's kind of what we walked through during this week leading up to Easter. And again, it is very important that we walk through that so that we can understand just the significance of the resurrection. But we can get to that next week.
yeah. So
Today, tell me about this parade and what are you going with?
yeah, so I'm real excited. I think there's a fascinating parallel when we start to describe this Palm Sunday. We have to contrast it. There have been some great teachers who've raised this parallel. So when the Roman, I forget the right word, Roman ruler Pontius Pilate
He
would have
was, yeah, he would have been the governor of the
prefect or
area.
something like that. There's a more technical term
Right.
that they use, but
Yeah.
ruler. So in anticipation of Passover, which Passover would have been a time when the people would have been celebrating a lot of family gatherings, but would have had a little bit of a nationalistic fervor. For example, if around July 4th, we're all going to put on our red, white, and blue, and we're going to do fireworks. Passover in Jerusalem in Jesus's day would have had some element of nationalism. There was Roman occupation that they all resented, having to pay the taxes, all of the ways that Rome, had really put their thumb on the life of the people called Jews, Israel. So when Pontius Pilate would have entered in anticipation of, hey, we're gonna meet any unrest with brute total force of Rome. He would have entered on that big horse. He would have been accompanied by, armored soldiers.
Yeah,
He
the
would have had
legions.
their swords and they
Yeah.
would have had their shields. And I mean, they would have been in an impressive display, like a military. You see, um, these pictures out of Russia and North Korea when they have the parade. They walk by the great ruler, and the ruler stands there looking quite content. Look what kind of power I've got. That's the vibe you would have been getting on behalf of Rome. Rome
Yeah.
would have been
And,
really relishing that show of force.
and it's not just that they would put down anything, it's don't even try it.
Yeah,
Don't
what's going to
even,
happen to you if you even think
yeah,
about it?
yeah. And you can get why so empire, uh, occupation, oppression of people, and Passover is about the liberation of the oppressed.
Mhm.
So, the Romans were not uneducated. They were very learned people and they understood the culture that they were dealing with. And so they would have known the story of Passover and they would have known that it's a story that is based in basically a slave revolt in
Yeah,
from their perspective. So that's not what you want if you are the controlling interest of an area. You want people to remain coward and cooperative with your power so that you can maintain control. And so any
And
story
Rome
that
would
would
have been,
seek to
yeah.
undo your control, well, you're gonna react to it.
So Rome would have been flabbergasted that these backwoods people called Jews um, weren't recognizing the real amazing ability of Caesar. Caesar is Lord, they would have proclaimed. Caesar is at least quasi divine in their mind.
Yeah.
Caesar rules the world.
Well,
And
and
why
and the
can't these
interesting thing
Jews see
too
it?
is I think something we forget historically is that Rome as an empire, so Rome existed first as a republic, then becomes an empire. And it had only been an empire, I don't know, this time, somewhere around 60 years or so. So it's still proving itself. And the way you prove yourself is when you're insecure is often you overshow, you overplay your hand, you act like you're stronger than you may be. So
Mm.
um, I think I'd never really thought too much about that uh, until I started uh, reading more about Julius Caesar. And but Rome is young in the empire stage, but still they knew how to control, and they knew how to. Oh, they had the strongest military the world had ever seen to that point, and they liked to use it. And part of the and so they used their military to extract revenue and resources from the occupied lands. So everything has to feed back to the home base. And this is so they know what it means to constantly be the aggressor and to be the one and what is they dominated. And that's a phrase I think we should hang on to because interesting book called The Last Week by John Dominic Crossan and Marcus Borg. And don't get some people may hear the name Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan and get their hackles up. Just read it. They're really good historians, right? Um, and they talk a lot about the domination system. And so this is a domination system under which Rome operated. That it was a system designed to dominate those who were not Roman. And to be a Roman citizen was this supreme, um, well, it was like a supreme status. It meant you were better than everybody else. So if you're going to be better than everybody else, it means somebody else has to be worse or less than. And that's part of that
So,
domination system.
so on Sunday, I'd like to contrast that domination system with the depiction of Jesus, who crawls up on the back of a donkey, a young donkey, according to the scriptures, never been ridden, and just the whole image of Jesus on this little lonesome donkey with a few. We don't know how many followers, but it wouldn't have been 100, 200, maybe.
Yeah.
And in this just contrast of Rome's power versus Jesus's humility as he walks down the hill into Jerusalem with a few folks, and they're waving some palm branches, which certainly are, they have a message that Hosanna, and this was kind of in relationship to practices of previous kings, but just the contrast between the power of Rome, the humility of Jesus would have been such a stark contrast, and the message that is being conveyed that probably only those Jewish folks who really were steeped in the tradition, who understood the scriptures, would have really understood all of the images that Jesus represents as he comes in this messianic claim.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and how many people actually were part of it, right? We don't know. The word crowd, the way it's used in scripture is different than how we understand crowds. And, when I think about a crowd, I think about a lot of people. Language in the New Testament around crowd could be a handful of people or it could be a lot of people. So it's not definitive. But what is definitive is that Jesus is very intentionally staging a sign act, I believe, as in a prophetic way. So he is saying, and he wants that contrast to be seen by all who will pay attention, that this is a different way. This is a different. I see the power of Rome. Jesus was not indifferent or unaware that Rome was powerful in a military sense, in a political sense, and he recognizes that and he sees it. But this is in some way, I think there is a connection back to Jesus's teaching of turn the other cheek. And that's, often we look at that and we think, especially in our culture, that that's a sign of weakness. Well, when you read that scripture, it's not. To turn the other cheek, if someone strikes you, offer them the other cheek also, is a way of shaming their power, of subverting power, not of giving into power or losing or giving, and it's especially not a sign of losing your own power. It's a sign of saying, I've got more power than you, so much that your violence isn't going to infect me. And and so there's something, I think there is a connection there. And the one who taught turn the other cheek, the one who taught love your neighbor, the one who taught do unto others as you would do have them do unto you. This one who is coming in and in his weakness, he is somehow a threat.
Mm.
And there's a I want to call it irony. There's something beautiful there that Rome is scared to death, which, by the way, title of this week's sermon at Denver United Methodist Church, is scared to death of someone who, on the surface, has zero power, who doesn't possess an army, who doesn't even own a sword, who has no um, really no political capital, who has what they, on the surface again, nothing. And they are scared to death of this peasant on a donkey. And there's a great irony there, right? I think about the mouse and the elephant, that elephants really are afraid of mice. I know that because I watched Mythbusters, the entire series on it. But why would an elephant be afraid of a mouse? But Rome is
Well,
afraid of this peasant on a donkey.
and where I want to kind of finish up on Sunday and invite you to comment today. So, because humility is not weakness in the way we think of weak, meaning no backbone, no strong will. Because we see the very next day, according to Mark's timeline, Jesus walks in on Sunday into Jerusalem, then turns around and goes back to Bethany, and then on Monday comes back, where Mark records that Jesus cleanses the temple. Now, this is one of those troubling scenes for some of us who kind of, always think of Jesus meek and mild. When you see Jesus coming into that temple area, and if you pay attention to John's account of it, Jesus brings some cords like in a whip,
But it's
and
just
and
that
really
he and
begins to
well,
snap it.
yeah, I like what the way John does it. And again, this is some of the where we can't make the gospels all congruent. That comes early in John's gospel, not during Holy Week. But John says specifically he sat down and making a whip out of cords, that that this isn't a rash act on Jesus's behalf. This is a premeditated. It wasn't, and sometimes people say Jesus flew into a rage. I don't see that. I see a premeditated act to show, again, back to the sign act as a prophet would do, that this system needs to change and it is corrupt and it is not of God.
So in this scene, he turns over the tables of the money changers and those who were profiting from the selling of animals. If you're not familiar with that system, it's part of the sacrificial system where people literally bought animals so that they could sacrifice them. Or if they were going to pay their tax, they had to convert their Greek money or whatever money they had, Roman money, into a shekel, and then they were charged for that. So there was a real commerce. There was an economic system
Mhm.
built around this. And Jesus, according to the scriptures, walks in, sees this, and as Steve says, he didn't fly into a rage. He goes into a premeditated, I'm fixing this today.
Mhm.
And you can imagine Jesus going around and literally flipping over tables and challenging the system. I'm going to guess there was pretty much backlash, and people were very upset and angry, and probably lasted all of about an hour. After Jesus left, they had the table set back up. System was still in place, but
Yeah.
Jesus had registered the very righteous anger of God against it.
Yeah. Yeah. It would have, things would have reverted to how they always work. But we remember it 2,000 years later and we read about it and we think about it. And what does God say in that? God says, I don't, God doesn't like oppression. And it was in some ways a form of oppression and there was profit taking. There's so many lessons from that. Like, uh, our faith in God shouldn't be about taking profit, should
Mm.
be making money off of it. Um, it's and two, there was a we think about Jesus' teachings about the Pharisees, and especially you remember Jesus tells the story of the Pharisee who goes into the temple and prays out, thank God I'm not a tax collector, I'm not a sinner. I'm so grateful, God, for that I'm so righteous. And then the tax collector comes in and beats his chest and says, have mercy on me, God, I'm a sinner.
Can't even look up.
Right. So there was that dynamic in the temple meant that if you were a person of means, you would go in and make a show of the type of sacrifice you could afford. And you would go get the best sacrifice and bring it. But if you were poor, you were still expected to make a sacrifice. And if you couldn't afford the fancy stuff, the minimum was two turtle doves. And so if you saw somebody walking around the temple with two turtle doves, you're like, look at where'd they come from? Look at those hicks from out there. Look at those urchins. You like that? That's very Dickens. I like Charles Dickens, so I use that word. I know you
Amen.
grew up with Charles Dickens, so I thought I would throw that in there for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so,
So, which
but
fascinatingly, Mary and Joseph
offered two turtle
offer the
doves.
two turtle doves is recorded. So,
It's
quite
the
fascinating.
welfare offering. And what I would like to challenge all of us to think about is how important is status to us? We get caught up in status all the time. And um, just it, it drives our economy. It drives our egos. It drives in some ways, our sense of well-being is often tied to the status we think we have in the culture. So
Yes. So,
this isn't just about Jesus saying this was wrong 2,000 years ago. It's about Jesus saying also, where are you concerned about your status in ways that belittle others and you try to lift yourself up? And I think about too, like, so I want to take you back, Paul, back in time, if you can remember this, way back in time when you were in middle school. Uh, what kind of car would you have liked to have had your mom drop you off in front of middle school?
in middle school, probably some sort of Mercedes,
Yeah.
or some some fancy
Right,
Cadillac or something
right.
like that.
Or when you're in high school, what kind of car would you have liked to have had? Right?
Oh, I was going to get a Ford Mustang, a muscle car, or maybe a Trans Am, something like that. That's what I had
What
my
did
eye
you
set
enter?
on, and I ended up with a Chevy Chevette. So my
Well, you
parents
got a
showed
vet.
I got a vet, Chevette, not Corvette.
When I was in middle school, my older one of my older brothers, Chris, got his license, which meant hey, he was going to get a car and he was going to be able to drop me off on his way to high school. And that's a big deal, right? Well, the only car Chris could afford was I think it was like a 1976 Subaru. The thing was green. I even had this absurd racing stripe down the side, and the motor in it was shot. The rings were ruined. He was going to have to put a new motor in it. It used so much oil that he stopped buying oil and just started pouring chain bar lube for a chainsaw into the crankcase. And so he would drop me off in that Subaru that's smoking like nobody's business, like James Bond getting away from villains. And when he would pull away, everybody would be coughing and putting their hands over their mouths and going, "Oh my God!" And I'm slinking in through the front doors of middle school. Uh, but I think about that now, and it seems really funny. Back then, it was horrifying. But I mean, but think about that. We really do often judge people by what they wear, what they drive, where they live. And all of these things are struggles for the church today. So I hope folks can see that Jesus holds up a mirror to us as well. Not only is he saying to the people of the first century, these are the places where you need to pay attention. These are the places God is not pleased. These are things to address. He's still doing that if we will pay attention.
And that ties into, and we'll get to hopefully this next week, but on that Thursday night, by Thursday night, John records that Jesus takes off his outer robe, ties a towel around his waist, and begins the Passover supper celebration by washing his disciples' feet,
Mhm.
which is an unbelievable act of humility and really
Yeah,
self-deprecation
right.
to show that, hey, this is how I want you to live in relationship with
Well,
me and with one another. This is
and,
what it looks like.
and we can't even begin to understand that relationship from rabbi to student, that this is so abnormal. It would be like the tenured professor helping proofread their teacher's assistant's paper. It would be like the senior partner in the law firm helping a brand new associate write their first couple of briefs. It just didn't happen, right? It's supposed to go that way, not this way. And Jesus, yeah, again, there's all kinds of types of inversion that happen during Holy Week, where Jesus upends traditional expectations for for power, for master and servant. Uh, but one of the things about that comes out of that night, especially in John's gospel, is the statement and you'll notice in John's gospel, Jesus spends a lot of time, or at least John rather spends a lot of time talking about what happened at the table. We don't get that in the other gospels. And we call that the farewell discourses. At least that's what the scholars call it. And but one of my more compelling lines in there is when Jesus looks at them and says, "I don't call you servants any longer. I call you friends,
Mm,
because servants don't know what the master is doing, and you are my friends."
mm.
And so, one of the things I like to say to you, Paul, is, yeah, you're a great friend, and friendship matters. And that's a little aside as you're getting ready to retire. There's your, I may get you a retirement gift. I don't know, but uh, I do appreciate our friendship and our ability to discuss these things. And what we'll do next week, if you all will join us again, is we'll go a little deeper into the events of Holy Week as we get ready to head into Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and eventually Easter.
Well, and let me add here. I know that a lot of times we equate the Christian faith as, quote, showing up for church. And I don't want to make that mistake. But when we participate in these services, when we listen to what God might be saying to us on a Maundy Thursday, a Good Friday, an Easter sunrise, or a Easter celebration, then we take what we hear and it becomes a part of us. It becomes a way that we relate to the world. Then that really is the word becoming flesh. That's a way that the word actually can make a difference. It's not just showing up and checking a box, say I showed up for church. It's engaging in the story. It is finding ourselves in that story. Who do I relate to? Where am I in that story? Where would I have been as Jesus walks down that mountain into Jerusalem that day? What would I have been experiencing? As we relate so carefully to the story, it really can help deepen the understanding of what's going on, and it can lead to transformation of our life. And that's what I'm hopeful for this coming Sunday and throughout next week. These are powerful stories, and I hope you'll participate.
Yeah, and also it's important more, maybe more now than ever, when everything seems up for grabs, when there's a lack of permanence and lack of even identity, meaning, to root yourself in the traditions of your faith that ground us, that they give us a mooring so that we don't get lost in all the other things that go on out there. This is who we are. This is our story. Most importantly, it is the story of God that we are invited to participate in. So so when you do come, please, um, I just want to lift up, for us for Palm Sunday, we're having one service. It falls on the fifth Sunday. We're going to honor our tradition of having one service on fifth Sunday. So we'll have a chance to all of us to cram into the sanctuary. And I certainly hope that sanctuary is full to overflowing as because it gives, again, the ability to come and be in physical proximity to each other in this time is so important. And then, of course, throughout Holy Week and into Easter. So, again, this Sunday, 10 a.m., one service at Denver. What about you good folks over at Huntersville?
So we have two services, an 8:30 and a 10:30 service. The 8:30 more traditional, 10:30 a little more modern. And then next week, it's Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday at 7. We have a luncheon on Good Friday at noon. We have a Friday evening service at 7 p.m. And then we have Easter sunrise at 7 a.m. with our Baptist siblings, First Baptist, and then one big service outdoors, hopefully, if the weather cooperates, on Easter Sunday at 10 a.m. in our kind of back parking lot, as has been our tradition for the last few years. So, lots of opportunities to come and participate.
And of course, you can find all this information on either church's website. So please go
Absolutely.
there to if you have any questions. But thank you, Paul, and thank you all for joining us. Do like, recommend all the stuff we're supposed to say for social media, and thank you for being a part of this journey.
We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, God bless everyone.